You're listening to the Business of Medicine podcast created by Mirazi. We are a medical co-working space located in Upper Hill, the heartbeat of healthcare in Nairobi.
Welcome once again to the Business of Medicine, sponsored by Mirazi. Here we preserve the stories that have been in the business of medicine. We are growing the business of medicine and through mentorship and sharing information. Today I'm particularly very excited about having our guest, who is Dr. Wahome Karanja, a renowned ENT surgeon in Nairobi, rhinologist, anterior skull-base surgeon, a former Kenya ENT Society chairman, and also an entrepreneur, having started a group practice in ENT called Prodigy ENT, and having started City Health in town, and he'll tell us a lot more about that. My name is Dr. Alan Gray Mukuzi, and I'm here with Dr. JP. Karibu sana daktari.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's anything else I've left out in your introduction that you'd like to
thank you so much
throw in there.
No, I think it's good enough, and I appreciate the invitation, JP and Alan. Asante.
We are happy to have you. We chose you for very many reasons. You cover many aspects of healthcare or the business of healthcare and medicine that we were interested in discussing. So one of them would start from like fellowship. You did a fellowship in rhinology. And just for context for the audience, we only have 2 certified rhinologists in Kenya. He was the first one. And then you are also an entrepreneur. You've started one of the very few group practices in ENT in Kenya. There are not many. I might say about 5 or thereabout.
Yes,
I stand to be corrected.
Right, yes.
Yeah, but there are about only 5 of them in the country. And then now there's City Health, which is of keen interest, which is a good outpatient center, smack in the middle of city center.
Yeah.
And I would like to know why that was there, but you'll tell us more about that there. But I think I want to start a bit far back, while in residency or while studying for ENT. From what I understand, that's where the kind of roots of starting Prodigy began.
Correct.
I know initially you were toying around with the group practice while you're doing your postgraduate, and there were supposed to be 3 of you. Maybe you can just tell me about that. And I think you are the eldest, I don't want to say the eldest, the senior. You are ahead of them in terms of your studies.
Correct.
Ahead of the other 2. So I'm interested. Why these 2? How did you end up courting these other 2 guys?
Okay. So thank you very much. So anyway, so I think I had obviously a passion for healthcare, and specifically in this line of work, which is ENT. And I think that's what led me to imagine that we can be able to have a group practice. And when you're having a group practice, you want to look for people who are sort of like-minded, whether they are ahead of you or behind you. I had also the opportunity of being friends to these 2 people, so I knew them for a lot longer, so therefore it was easier to gravitate to them. I was luckier to sort of join the program a little ahead of them, probably because I had worked in a hardship area, and at the time, the ministry was giving scholarships. It was pre-devolution, and therefore you would get the opportunity to be sponsored by the government for a master's training if you've worked for a minimum of, say, 2 years post internship. I had done 1 year in Wajir, and therefore I qualified for an earlier sort of scholarship. So in essence, I would have joined with these 2 colleagues. I was with them in the undergraduate program, but I joined a year earlier. So I already knew them from undergraduate and internship days. So then, therefore, there was that history. And so we felt, because again of, information, because of what we were seeing in our residency in terms of patient care and how we were seeing our seniors with their evolving sort of mature practices, we got to see the ones who had started a group practice, and we felt that was the model that we wanted to have, because eventually most of us want to have a private area of practice as we maintain, or say abandon the public space. And so the question is, what kind of model are you going to be? A solo practitioner, group practitioner, both of which have their pros and cons. And we felt for us 3, it was a better kind of model to have a group practice. It gives you the flexibility of timing. It gives you many other advantages. And so that's where the discussion was from that early point in time in terms of setting up group practice.
While you guys were in undergraduate together, did you know all three of you were going to do ENT?
Absolutely not. In fact, none of us, and I believe it's the same scenario for many clinical practitioners. No one knows what they're going to end up specializing in. One thing I knew for sure in internship is I was going to do something surgical. But this is internship, and so my head was on either general surgery, perhaps neuro, which was not a program being offered at the time, and obstetrics gynecology. But few things happen in somebody's life that push them in a certain direction. One of which is if you've rotated in a subspecialty and you sort of like it, and then you reach out to people who are potential mentors and ask them, this small thing or field called ENT which makes you happy, what's this about? And when you inquire a little bit further, perhaps even attend a conference, and you realize it's much bigger than you think, and so you get an interest and you sort of make a decision. So none of us actually had wanted to do ENT. All of us I knew had wanted to do something surgical, but somehow we ended up in ENT practice.
A question again on just that. You said that at the time you had seen some group practices at the time. From what I understand, in fact, at that time in ENT, at the time there was only one group practice. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Actually, there were two.
There were two
at
the time.
Yes.
And were you close to these people? Had you had conversations with them to tell you like what it's like to do a group practice? What are the ins and outs of a group practice?
Yes, I think very informal sort of conversations of what group practice is, and a lot more of observing how that group practice sort of churns out. And I had the opportunity of working with one of the group practices immediately after I graduated for a period of time before my my eventual move to do my fellowship training. But by that time, we were already concretizing the idea amongst the three of us that we were going to form our own practice.
Okay, so you took your laptops, you went to Java, you started talking and scribbling on a piece of paper about what this thing would look like. So the conceptualization of this thing, like how long did that take?
Okay.
From the time you conceptualized to the time you actually, we're ready to start this thing.
So remember the discussion is during MEd. So we're talking about somewhere around 2008 thereabout, or 2009. And it's just an idea. We keep throwing it. One day we're going to do something. Where do you think so? I mean, where do you think we're going to do it? Probably Upper Hill. And we knew for sure location meant Nairobi. Yeah. So at least we've zeroed in on that conversation. We don't know how we are going to do it, but it's an ongoing conversation. Fast forward to finishing masters. Now you're starting to try and dust yourself, because you'll all agree with me. Residency is a really humbling experience. It takes away any resources that you may have had. So you're trying to build up as well, and you're imagining if you're going into further training about fellowship training. So that discussion continued, and a year after I finished, and now my two potential partners were also finishing, I was privileged to get into my fellowship program training. So I moved off to Germany. But the conversation continued outside of the Java meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say, okay, fine, we need to develop a business plan. We need to have an idea of what we are doing. And I think I was really pushing. Initially, because they were finishing their residency, I felt like I was pushing more. When they finished, and they're also starting to find their footing, both in public and private sector, I still continue to push. Now, when I came back, now the idea had to concretize. So between 2008 to 2011, when I came back, is where now the rubber needed to meet the road. So now we zeroed in on many things, one of which was we need to have this group practice. How do we structure it? So we have to have something like a business plan. If I look at the business plan we developed, it's real. It's not the most professional, but we used the resources that we had at the time to come up with a plan of what does group practice look like, what are the advantages of this thing, and where do we want to locate it? What are the factors that will make us locate a practice? One of which is our lives. Where do you want to build your life? Where do you want to live? Where are you surrounded by more practitioners so you can benefit from direct referrals? And if they are working also within a certain distance, can they be able to refer those patients quicker? If we will end up working, say, in the referral hospital, can we be able to go there? Where do we want to admit patients that we see in the clinics? So how close is it? So location is very key and primal. One of which, of course, the most important is how many patients can come. If you locate a private practice close to a very busy metropolis where there's a lot of medicine being practiced, then you will tend to get a lot of referrals because you're in specialty care. And so we narrowed down to areas. So, for example, at the time we were playing around with the idea of Westlands or Upper Hill. Those are the areas we identified. So you do a feasibility. Those are the areas we identified as potentially the ones with the biggest catchment of clients. And then so now we then zeroed in on Kenyatta and on Kenyatta Upper Hill area, and then now finally to a place which is KMA Center, which was eventually where we set up the practice. And now when you are around, now you start looking for space. Then you start realizing space comes at a cost per square foot. And then you have to have other considerations: parking space, proximity to other features, public transportation system, the cost of rent, buy versus rent. Buy, of course, doesn't make sense for people who are starting out. How is the rent, lease agreements? So those are the things that led us to eventually KMA. So I would say, to answer your question in a very long way, about 4 years to concretize it, and now open in 2013. So almost 5 years from concept to actualization of the idea.
And at this point, did you guys already have patients? Like, had you built up a base, or was it just like, let's open this thing and then the patients will come?
Fortunately, we had. And the point that I skipped is I was fortunate to have a space, again, from an older consultant friend whom I begged for space, and he said, "You young guy, I'll allow you space to see people here." And so then you get the hang of, seeing patients. You also get the benefit of having a space where you're not paying for, a receptionist and a front office that is being paid for by this benevolent older colleague. And so you start seeing patients, and then you get the idea that, yes, we can build from this. So in a way, we had already a small client base, but it was very blind to imagine that we were going to have a blow up. We did not have a big grown practice. We grew the practice a lot more when we moved to the new space. Yeah, so there's many days when we were filling Sudokus and fiddling our thumbs without seeing clients.
Reading newspapers.
Yeah.
Now let's get to like the details of actually starting the group practice. Maybe we start from the legal end of things. When guys are starting out a medical business, they don't know what is probably required initially. I don't know if things have changed between then and now, but at your time, what were the legal requirements? How did you go through that? Did you have to get a lawyer? Nowadays, you can do it via eCitizen by yourself.
Correct.
I want to imagine at that time, you probably had to hire someone to do the footwork for you. What's the legal bit of it that you had to go through? What gave you the biggest headache? And then now we go to the financial bit of it.
Okay. So when you are starting a group practice or any business, then you need to register a business name. So you need to come up with a name. So we played around with many names that represent what it is we want. What does it mean? In our case, Prodigy meant sort of futuristic or different, and that's why we picked it. And we called it Prodigy ENT. And here in clinic, we wanted it to be a holistic clinic that covers the entire spectrum of care, because those are the gaps that we were seeing in, say, not necessarily in other solo practices and in the general private space. So what that meant is we needed some good level of equipment, and that's why it was expensive to also start up at that level. And and then you start thinking, what are the drivers of you as personalities and as business people. One of them for us was ethics, integrity, that kind of thing. So, and integrity means then you also give the best care possible. So when you decide that as a vehicle you're going to use a limited a company, first of all, you need to seek good legal advice. Fortunately, when you are in medicine, you have had classmates who end up in law school, others end up in engineering, others end up in quantity surveying. So you can call up on these friends, get subsidized, probably even free advice. And how is it to start a limited liability partnership? How is it to start a limited company? What are the benefits from an entity's level in terms of even taxation going forward, exits and stuff? So we registered as a limited liability company. So there is a name search that comes with it. Then it was a lot more manual, and you're right. Now you can actually do it yourself through eCitizen, and then you'll generate a CR12. But there's shareholding of that limited liability. Now, one of the things we knew eventually we would want to grow our practice. If we are the founding partners, we want to bring in other guys who will join and grow the practice, so that then it outgrows us, so to speak. But we didn't plan for that scale properly. So a lot of, probably we'll talk about this later, a lot of those questions about scale we did not answer, including even the space itself. So we knew we want to grow. We want to outgrow this space, but we didn't really, our minds were very stuck on that, just that first sort of launch and movement and growth of this company, but not beyond what you call scale. And so those are the things that now we are dealing with at this point. So from a legal standpoint, you want to have good legal advice. What kind of entity do you register? The timelines of this registration. Beyond that, there is the other organizations that you need to use to register, the Medical and Dental Practitioners Council. If you need, say, specialist recognition to be able to be allowed to open a center of this kind, there are other considerations. Are you going to be a cash business, or are you going to attract private and public insurance? There are those requirements that they have. So, for example, if you are a practicing liability company that from July now with the new SHIF will want to be accredited to SHIF. You want to be at the highest level, which then gives you a bigger capitation than a level 1 or level 2. What does it take to get to be a level 3 or level 4 that gets to attract better capitation, and therefore you make more for the time that you spend by seeing clients? So those are we were lucky to get good legal advice, but there were a bit of hits and misses there. So anyway, we registered the company, and that's a company that now goes into contractual agreements going forward with other partners. And the partners, I mean the insurances, the landlord with whom you're signing a lease, and any other sort of legal arrangements or partnerships.
Then you've done that, and by the time you are doing that legal bit, you already had the space.
No, we did the legal bit first in terms of registration. So you register, you have a name, a business name, you pack it. Fortunately, in the medical business, we are not VAT. VAT is not one of our requirements, so we are lucky. So you don't have to have monthly returns. It's just pay as you earn. So we have that window of about 3 or 4 months, even after registration, to identify space. And even as we identified space, by the way, when we locked in and zeroed in on that space, we were already negotiating with 2 to 3. So I think another piece of advice is keep your options open and negotiate with, not negotiate, but start creating interest with 3 or 4, say, potential locations as opposed to one. Because if it falls out and the landlord suddenly tells you, I've gotten a better client who's paying a lot more, they're more experienced in the business, and you're stuck and you have to go to square one. And this is very, very vital, I have found, especially when you're going to chase for financing. Do not court one financer. You will give them revelations and they will want to know the meal that you ate last night, to know whether you are credible as a borrower, and they can drop you off after that 6 months journey. It will take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to actually secure capital. And we were dropped off in our next business by 5 of them, and then only one took us up. So can you imagine if we were talking with just the one? And so it leaves you very exposed. You've already negotiated beforehand. This for us was for a capital injection into our new business that we really required. And if we did not have the option of the ones who came through for us, then that business was going to struggle.
Good. Now, let's get to the money bit of it. So you guys have done the legal bit, you've parked it. Now you're searching for space. Now you're looking for space. It's Upper Hill. At that time, the options in Upper Hill included KMA. I don't know which other buildings were within there. How did you settle on KMA? What were the figures that you were working with, if you may reveal? What were the actual figures you were working in? And in retrospect, are there other costs that you incurred that you feel like you could have avoided? If you were to do it again, are there other costs that you could have avoided?
Okay, so KMA is obviously owned by the Kenya Medical Association. So it's generally thought of as a hospital sort of business. A lot of doctors are located in KMA, and therefore that helps for cross-referral between the specialties. So that was a good thing. And also as a building, there are things like considerations like, say, medical waste. And a building like that, because then there are multiple clinics and has also contracts with people who have medical waste disposal. There are some buildings which have businesses that would not be able to understand that kind of requirement. And so midway into negotiating with them and tell them these are some of the things that we are involved in. If we do some surgical procedures, say minor procedures, we are basically an outpatient clinic with very limited sort of minor procedures, but nonetheless we're dealing with human tissue and so on. And therefore some buildings will tell you, or some landlords will tell you, I didn't know that. I don't think we can continue with this discussion here. So that's a consideration. So KMA was good for us because it was ideal. It was easy to get to. There were doctors, because we're in an early practice where we don't have a lot of build-up of clients. So we want to be able to be in a place where their colleagues, and I can knock on their door and say, man, my friend, are you saying you don't have 1 or 2 ENT clients who need to be seen? I'm just here. So we had to sort of directly market to these colleagues, and then of course you create friendship and so on. And I think those were some of the considerations. What would we not do that we did then? I think we overthought and overspent on certain aspects of our practice and underestimated where we should have put a lot more effort in, which in most businesses I think tends to be the marketing arm of business. So you want to set up a good business, and it's properly set up and you have everything that you need, but you've not thought about the human capital side of things, the supportive front office staff, for example, perhaps nursing staff and so on. And very importantly, your marketing strategy, because you want to recoup your investment as much as possible. But the belief, almost naively, of most startup businesses is, when I set up, everyone knows I'm here, they'll come. And I think all of us have experienced that.
Yeah.
That you set up and you sit down and say, you roll up your sleeves and say, come on. And by the end of the day, you've seen no one. So that was one of the things we should have invested heavily in from the outset.
So how much did it cost you guys? And where did you get the money from for the initial setup?
Okay, so it cost us a total of about 8 million shillings. Again, on legal, which is very important, as I answer your question, JP, is, so we are 3 partners. We ended up becoming 2. So we've been 2 partners since, and now the practice has grown and we're bringing in other colleagues. Not bringing them in, they've always been there, but now we're in the process of thinking through how they can become partners and owners in the business and also grow the business. But so we had a fallout with one of them for their own reasons, and fallouts are not necessarily acrimonious. You decide that you want to set up somewhere else, or I don't want this group thing. We were lucky that just at the point of signing off those agreements, there was that fallout. And so can you imagine if you have a shareholding list of people who are out of the game even before you start? So it's very vital to spend enough time considering who you're going to work with as the initial shareholders or directors in a business, because that will have long and far-reaching effects on the business itself. So so now fast forward to the requirement. We had been discussing about 8 million shillings. So suddenly we are 2. And each of us required to pay a third of that amount of money. But we're looking at each other now. That third has become a half. Suddenly from about 2.8 to 4 million shillings. And by that time, you've borrowed to the hilt. We use the traditional avenues of borrowing, which is basically friends, the little savings that you have to the last drop, and negotiating with the landlord and saying, unatujua. Fortunately, our landlord was a doctor, so he understands the journey of struggling in the profession. And so you start managing those relationships from very early on and say, I have a dream, I'm going to be good for this money. So it sort of cuts on your startup cost. But it was 8 million shillings, fit out, lease. And it was a lot more than that, because as a requirement, you should ideally, if you're thinking about setup costs, I think it's important to imagine a whole year. What are your costs going to be? There need to be a wage. Perhaps you also want to give yourself some level of revenue to keep the lights on and say, and there's a consumables that will come, not just the initial setup capital. There's Wi-Fi, phone charges, marketing costs and expenses. We did not take a lot of those things into consideration. We thought about furniture, full setup, and we'll be running to the bank. That's what it cost.
And just to go back on what you talked about marketing.
Yeah.
So if you were to compare your budget as a percentage on what you use in marketing initially versus what you use now, what ballpark figure are we looking at? Because I agree with you 100%. You have to get patients through the door. To come and look at that nice furniture and those nice machines that you have,
that's true.
and actually buy the service. So how would you compare then and now marketing?
It has improved, but imagine we're not there yet. And we still have a problem giving out. First of all, budgeting is something that many businesses do not even sort of do well, especially SMEs, startup businesses. Ideally, you want to plan ahead for success. And to succeed, you need a plan, which is a budget. Ideally, most corporates will tell you anywhere between, say, 15 and even 30% of your revenues should go into marketing. I think for any medical business, you're talking about maybe 15%. And that will keep you going. And that, I think, is a big differentiator between the guys who go ahead, especially in the larger, bigger businesses, and the ones who remain without scaling. So I would say about that. Where are we now? I would say we are around, in the initial, we were almost at zero, because then you're the one who's doing your marketing. One of the things that really helped us, and by the way, there's a role for digital marketing, and the younger group of doctors, there's a lot of Gen Z. 70% of the Kenyan population is below the age of 35. So these are tech-savvy guys who are always on the internet. Go-to is online shopping and everything else. They get their information that they make a decision on through the digital space. And so the traditional methods of having a business development person go knock door to door still has its role. Podcasts like this is digital media. This is probably even more powerful. So I feel that rather than a business viewing a marketing expense as an inconvenience, they should look at it as a necessity.
You guys have been around as Prodigy. You've been around for now close to 10 years. 11
years, actually.
11. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You're kind of over the hump of the dark days.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. And just for context again, you have two founding, we call them founding partners.
Correct.
And then how many more do you have under your cover?
So we have 4 more. So now, I'm proud to say we are 6.
Oh, fantastic.
Surgeons in our practice.
That's not easy.
No, it's not.
That's not easy.
Yeah.
And that's where my next question comes. Like, what would you give? I know you said you're still trying to figure it out, but what is the advice that you would give for anyone who's looking to start a group practice in terms of pairing and how you select someone who would be a good fit? What would be a good fit for Prodigy?
Okay. So a good fit for Prodigy is somebody who is obviously an ENT surgeon, because it's an ENT practice, so has the requisite training, technical ability to work with others, with people, and these are things you can see over time, and just exposes the same values that we have, which are usually professionalism, excellence, people who have a patient-centered sort of approach and work well together. So you will tend to see these qualities, and you need to fish them out as you interact with your colleagues on a day-to-day. Some might approach you to join your practice. Some you might approach to join your practices. There's no hard and fast rule in terms of this sort of profession. But like I said, in the initial, our biggest mistake is we knew where we wanted to go, but we did not plan for it well. So as the practice grew, we needed colleagues to come in, and we've had many colleagues come and work with us, and they've moved on to start their own practices, either solo or even group, and they are successful. And I'm really proud of them. And if you ask them in conversation now why they did not stay, it's because we did not have the structure for them. So a time came where we realized we are part of building, but it's also removing from us. We're not growing the way we should, and a lot of it is because of the legal setup of the business. How do we set up legally as a practice poised to grow and bring in these guys who are specialists in their own right and want to remain with us and continue to grow with us? So we have now to start thinking about a shareholding structure or a management sort of partnership structure, which is very different from every other profession that we are aware of: quantity surveying, building, engineering, architectural and otherwise, law, which obviously has had long experience in terms of growing partnerships. In specialist medical practice, a little more nuanced than that. So you have to start thinking about what are the benefits of this practice, what does it mean, and also it brings a discussion of revenue share, which, because the practice, which is the house, has to keep something to be able to grow, but the partners have to keep accruing a certain benefit, personal and professional, by being in the practice.
And you bring another very important point. It seems like in medicine we have lagged behind when it comes to the legal structure of partnerships.
Right.
Our colleagues, the lawyers, the architects and engineers seem to be way ahead
True.
of us, because they've been doing that a lot longer than we have.
Yeah.
If we look at ourselves, I do not have actual figures, but I know that probably group practices in Kenya are probably not older than 35 years.
I would agree. Yeah.
Exactly. And in that 35 years, I don't think we've moved much.
Correct.
Because if you look at the number of group practices, there are very few, and we're still really struggling.
Correct.
And the same issues come up, like how do you reward loyal partners? How do you keep them interested? And how do you run a successful business while still covering all these other things? And then the other thing I noticed is that a lot of us as medical practitioners do not know the business end of things.
Correct.
So me, I'm a surgeon. I just know how to cut and fix, But now when it comes to these other things, hiring the secretary, paying the bills and whatnot, which are very important aspects to the business itself. So I wonder do you have any business background, you or your partner, do you have any business background that has helped you guys this far? Or did you it was just on job training?
Yeah, this has been a serious on-job training, and what happens is there should be no contradiction between good practice. You can't be top-notch clinical practitioner and also a good businessman at the same time. Just wear a different hat at different times. There is no contradiction in the two. Many people think that to do well in a healthcare business, you need to abandon clinical practice. I don't think anything could be further from the truth. So you can get both done. Unfortunately, in our undergraduate, postgrad, and any other training, and probably even in our institutionalization as doctors, we are not trained to think of businesses, perhaps because of the way the career is structured. The stories that this is a noble profession, you're out to save the world and that kind of thing, and bringing a business sort of ideology to it almost means that you're trying to take advantage of this very noble profession. But you need to keep the lights on. This is what pays the bills. And thinking of it as a business also improves certain things like customer experience, quality, and so on. And it also helps you to decide at what space or strata in terms of, say, even the socioeconomic demographic you want to play. So no, we did not have any business training. But fortunately, we also live in a time and a space where there's so much information. Podcasts like this. And, I mean, Mirazi, what you guys are doing is amazing, and I really have nothing more except wishing you the very best. This is really noble. I think it'll go a long way in terms of helping us demystify some of these things. So anyway, there's a lot of information out there, written, podcasts, that you can plug into and that can fill in the gaps in terms of how to run a business and how to think about your practice as a business, which will have a profit and loss. There's an input in terms of your time, resources, the equipment that you invest in the business that has to have an output that is positive. And that means then you will be able to improve, you'll be able to give the care that you require. So some of those resources are books that you can read, podcasts you can listen to. There are many sort of accelerator programs and launch programs. We benefited from one where we had a mentorship program for 6 months, my co-founding partner and myself, and I'm happy to share the details. And it is a subsidized program which carries you through what a business is and breaks it down properly from all the aspects of business, from the operational side of things, human resource, strategy, marketing, sales, those kind of things. So it helps you then to be able to package those things properly and correct the errors that you may have had in business before. So that's how we benefited, and that's how we were able to sort of grow our business and continue to run it. In terms of the partnership of the people coming in, because of lessons of seeing others going, then you have to force yourself to go to the legal firm because they're the ones who will help you to structure, and they've also had a longer experience in terms of structuring this, and say, okay, fine, what am I willing to offer as a business? And what do they have to offer as sort of joining partners? And then now you start concretizing an idea. So for example, in our case, would want somebody to work with us for a while, then that shows there's some level of loyalty. But you see, in the initial, it was always come work with us. And everyone wants some level of transparency and something written, like a plan. No one will want to work with you if you're saying we are going to think about those futuristic things. But they'll stick with you for 10 years if you show them this is year 1, year 2, year 3. Now getting to break that down into that granular level is a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice. But what we have done in our case, we have engaged with the other guys who are hoping to join us and join us in the long haul to discuss what do you think we should give. So it's a compromising sort of idea where now you break down remuneration into certain things. So are we going to salary guys? Yes. There's a clinic income or revenue that you make. There's a surgical revenue that you make. But guess what? There's tax, and there's also what has to be retained for the practice, because that's what ends up giving you the benefits. Are you going to have club membership, for example? Are you going to have a fuel card and allowance? Are you going to have a medical allowance for you and your family? Are you going to pay the bills for the other support staff who are within the practice, including business and marketing? And the guy who has more responsibility or is bringing in more, who's deciding a lot more, so what you might call a managing partner, does he get paid a lot more? Because then you need to reward according to the level of
effort.
Commitment, effort and time. So those are the things that we are sort of trying to structure now.
You seem to have it figured.
Sorry, closely related to that, because you've been in the business now 11 years, all right? Of course, you and your co-founder, you built up a certain level of cachet because you've injected a lot of value into this business.
Correct.
How is the cake shared? Because you have the partners, then you have the associates. Who gets what? If I bring in 100 patients, am I getting the same guy who's bringing in 10? Is it eat what you kill, where whatever I bring in, I eat? Yeah, just break it down for us.
Okay, so it's an eat what you kill, and it has to be that way. The guy who brings in more work is obviously going to be rewarded more, and that will give impetus to the other guy to work harder or something like that. So for us, our model is fairly simple, but now it's getting modified because of the introduction of the other team members that we want to grow with us. So it was always 70-30. So and it was really sacrificial on our part in the sense that from the beginning and to date, we never kept our outpatient revenue. Yeah. So for the clinic review, so if you walk in and if I see 20 patients today, I'm never going to claim that money as a founding partner. That money remains in the clinic. What I make, though, is a certain salary in a month, which is obviously much less than what I have brought in for my clinic visits. And the 70% of the revenue from my surgical clinic. So if I operate 20 guys and my partner operates 10, shauri yake. The guy has less revenue at the end of the month and he will try to work more. So that's the model that we use in terms of remuneration. So over time, obviously the guy who's bringing more work makes a lot more. You might feel that the guy who's only doing a tenth of the work is also getting paid nonetheless, but the truth is he's getting paid less. So then it will motivate you to work harder.
Okay.
We hope to get to a place, just to answer that cash story, where because sometimes you are not bringing in the cash because you're just starting out. I mean, I cannot expect somebody who has just graduated to have the same number of patients as I do. It's unfair to imagine that you're not working hard, then pull up your socks. That's not the story. The story is that he will get there and he'll build his brand. So we want to have that cushion which says, we know your potential, but you have your daily living expenses and other things. We are sitting with you for the long haul. You will get paid a certain amount of money, but at some level, you will bypass that level of income that you've been given, like say a salary. And then now you'll join that group of people who are eating what they kill. I don't know if I've answered
Yeah,
No, you have.
Perfectly,
You've
actually.
broken it down very simply because it always
Okay.
tends to be a sticky point, and again can also build a bit of resentment, I would imagine.
Yes, it can.
This guy is working super hard, bringing in 100, and then me it's just 5. Or if I fall ill, for example, my numbers go down, and then
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I'd like to move on to City Health. Introduce City Health.
Okay.
City Health.
So City Health is an outpatient hospital. Our regional branch is still in Nairobi, and it's in Odeon Cinema building on Tomboya Street, the busiest road, if you are unaware, in East and Central Africa. It's estimated that 1 million people cross Tomboya Street every day.
Oh, wow.
So City Health we started City Health from the proceeds of this 30% that we retain within the practice of Prodigy, and of course a business loan now that we qualified for because we have been banking, and so we have what you call audited financials for a certain period of time to qualify for a loan. 5 guys have dropped us, but 1/6 one has still given us some capital to asset finance. But the business built, fitted out, and so on, this outpatient hospital. It sees your standard client who requires to see a medical officer, and we also run specialist clinics within City Health Hospital. But it grew to a point where we also needed to branch out, and we opened a branch in Mombasa. So currently City Health Hospital has 2 branches in Mombasa and in Nairobi.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's quite exciting. Why did you pick Tomboya? First of all, how I remember Odeon Cinema is where that church used to be.
Yeah.
Kuna Nuru Gizani.
Correct. That's exactly where
Pastor
we are
Pius
located.
Muiru. I think that was his name. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that street, there are many buildings. And in fact, it's amazing that you got that space because it's very difficult to get space on that street.
True.
Because of simply, there are 1 million people who pass there every day.
Yeah.
So it's prime property.
Correct.
Getting space there, you're almost guaranteed to succeed because of the sheer traffic that passes through there. But it is very unusual for a medical practice to be there. Why did you guys feel like this would be the perfect place for us? Were there other potential places?
Yeah, I think there was many other potential places. So around 2016, we feel we need to grow, right? And we're wondering, what does growth look like? So there were 2 parts. One, we grow into a fully fledged ENT and a hospital, bring in more partners and or get into a bigger space, or do what we did with City Health, which is go back to primary level care and so build from the ground up. What made us choose the second path is there's a lot of noise about medical care at the time. There's a lot of quacks in the business who are bringing down the name of medical practice, and we felt we could plug in. We had been medical officers, we are still medical officers, and so we have an idea about what good care would be like. And so we felt the people who are most underserved are the ones in the lower middle and even the lower class of clientele. So we felt we can do something about them. So this was more like an impact business, but we felt with the high volumes, we can be able also to make enough revenues to sustain the business. So where else except a high volume place? So we had thought about places like Kencom Audion ambassador. The reason we were thinking of that is because we wanted to capitalize on the huge incoming flow of people and have the clinic, so to speak, almost behind the model of how you have supermarkets, which have high confluence of clients through public transport and so on, and therefore they can come. Again, not a very good assumption. I don't think it was the best for our business, and also you want somewhere where you say a name that is identifiable. So anyone who says Audion possibly knows, anyone who's been in Nairobi possibly knows Audion. So we were fortunate to get the space, we set it up, and that was 2017, and 7 years later, that's where we are. The Mombasa one is slightly different. It's along Treasury Square, which is on Nyerere Road, but again, near Fort Jesus. So again, if you're in Mombasa Island and you don't know where Fort Jesus is, again, you don't know Mombasa. So we were fortunate again to get a building that's there, which was formerly a bank. And so City Health continues to grow. So our decision was high volume business, primary care that can grow. Our vision obviously is that we can grow into many other branches, and hopefully these branches can be able to feed both the need and the traffic for an inpatient hospital. So what you might call a wheel and spoke model. Yeah.
A lot of healthcare businesses are built on the backs of insurance and insurance patients. I don't want to assume, but I would imagine that's the same for Prodigy and City Health. And getting those insurances on board can be a nightmare. How did you guys go about that? Did you get it done? What kind of timelines did it take you guys?
Okay. We were very lucky. At the time, I think the entire insurance industry, private insurance, medical insurance, maybe was going through transition. This is for Prodigy, right? But we were also very brave. Like, we would walk into the offices and just meet a guy who looks like he can listen to you. And even now, I think now it's probably worse, the belief by somebody who's opening a practice, I cannot get into an insurance panel. So there's a lot. I think we need a whole podcast to talk about the healthcare business and a healthcare and medical providers. The first misconception is that medical insurances don't like you. They'll accept you on board, but they'll not pay you. But medical insurance is not a person or an individual. It has a lot of curtains behind it. You have what you know as the name. Then you have the guy who is in case management. Then there's a guy who is in pays processing, and there's a guy who eventually pays. They don't necessarily talk to each other. So if you have a miscommunication, if you have a very good communication with case management, but this guy is not paying the bills, this insurance does not pay. Perhaps it's the language that you're using. So, for example, your handwriting or how much you're billing vis-a-vis what you've had as a service level agreement that doesn't conflict. So if you imagine somebody in the paying office has a cache of 300 papers, and he says, this doesn't look like that's how he should charge for this, anaeka chini. So you don't get paid. And the conclusion on your part is, these guys don't pay. But you have a miscommunication. So now this we learned later on. So, but to start with, we're very fortunate, and I can say this maybe on the podcast, the very first insurance we got on board was Old Mutual. UAP at the time, now it's Old Mutual. They had a young group of guys whom we could easily communicate with. We had, at the time, possibly the most advanced sort of setup in terms of ENT practice. So we were mesmerizing. The same way clients would come to our clinic and say, whoa, all these gadgets, is the same way the insurances would. So as long as you got them to get a foot into our clinic, we've not seen this kind of thing. So they were eager to sort of partner with us. And then, so that goes back to how you set up and how it could be attractive to the insurances. We went just the traditional route of, do you know somebody in this insurance? Can I get an intro? Can we start talking? So all in all, it took us about, say, a year of bringing one after the other. The very first insurance, we got them on board, say, in 3 months. And over a year, we probably brought in around 9. Today, we talk about the ones who are not on board, probably maybe 3 or so. But everyone else is on board. Some behave better than others, but those are relationships that you have to keep managing.
And this is both for Prodigy and City Health.
And for City Health as well.
Oh, that was well impressive. Done. That's impressive.
Yeah. Based on our experience.
Yeah.
That's quite impressive.
So I'm very happy to also have an offline discussion and be able to assist you, sort of opening some of those doors. But also importantly, if you have another podcast on insurance, or you can bring in the insurance guys, I think it would be good.
I think that's a good insight. Again, I go back to City Health. Now you've gotten all these insurances. First of all, tell me, are the demographics similar in the sense that the clientele you see at Odeon, at City Health, in terms of cash vis-a-vis insurance, the ratio, compared to the patients that you see at Prodigy Upper Hill, in terms of cash versus insurance, are they similar? I want to guess no.
Yeah, they're similar in terms of that ratio. So what is interesting, and we were thinking that we're going to be seeing a lot of cash-paying clients in City Health because walk-in, and that's the demographic. The insurances tended to be more. And when we opened City Health at the time, NHIF was a big payer. Now they're in restructuring mode, and hopefully they'll return because then every Kenyan will be on SHIF, so to speak. So at the time, the numbers to start with were more from NHIF. Then we started plugging in the private insurances one after the next. And so that same ratio has always been for City Health, 30-70. And also for Prodigy, 30-70. But the difference is the socioeconomic demographic very different.
Very different. Yeah, I would imagine.
So in Prodigy we see more of the middle class and higher middle class, upper middle class, so to speak. In City Health we see more of the middle class, lower middle class, so to speak.
Okay. And I imagine that the two businesses actually work in tandem, especially when it comes to ENT care.
Absolutely. Yeah. They complement each other. Sometimes it's difficult to see how that can work, but they do complement each other.
Okay. Your biggest headache when you are starting City Health, just tell me how that went. What was your biggest headache when you were starting City Health?
Definitely just bringing in the numbers, getting people through the door. Again, we made the same mistakes of assumption. We did not budget enough for marketing. And what I mean by budgeting enough is not just the money that goes into, say, the digital marketing and so on, but human resource. I think for me, the biggest lesson in business is hire the right people, even if it costs you a little bit more, because they're going to be able to get you faster to where you need to be. For example, if you have a front office person, their role is not just to queue patients for you to see. And after you see them, they're the foremost representation of your brand. How they look, how they dress, how they speak should be an extension of you as the brand that you've built to be in the business. So if there's a disconnect, then and patients look at that entire sort of chain of customer experience. If one person within the chain does not conform, then they're probably not going to come back. So it's very important that they own that brand and they are responsible for patients coming back and for their experience and that, so to speak. So for us, the mistake again was trying to cut down on the expenses. So get the best possible guy who can be able to do this at the best possible cost. It does have a problem in terms of how long you'll take to be able to leapfrog. The other assumption we made was that NHIF was paying so much at the time and so well that we don't need the private insurances because we've been having problems with them paying us at Prodigy because we had not understood that dynamic. That is not a person. It's an organization, and it means if they're not paying and yet somebody else gets paid, then there's something wrong with how you're communicating. So then when this other public payer is not giving us the same numbers, we start now going back to them and saying, oh, can we also deal with you guys in this part of the business and so on. So we should have plugged them in the immediate. We should have plugged in the right stuff and the right resources for marketing from the beginning, and that would have helped us to get to where we needed to be faster.
Okay, great. We're almost actually coming to an end because it's been a hell of a session. So what's up next with Prodigy? What should we expect in City Health? What does the horizon look like?
Okay, so in Prodigy, we're really excited about our group of 6 and the other supporting guys that we have. In terms of the growth, in the horizon, we are hopeful that we can get to a place where we can have a proper structure of our group practice, hopefully an ENT hospital. For City Health, we're hopeful that we can open more branches and we can have an inpatient facility that can be able to be served by these outpatient branches. And I think those two businesses then will be very impactful. The other hope that I have is that we can get into another line of care, which is not necessarily directly related. And what I'm talking about is things like leveraging on technology, like telehealth. I think also, maybe in answer to that question, a business is basically the identification of a problem and trying to create a solution for it. And that solution can be monetized. I think going forward, especially for medical practitioners, we're not stuck to that traditional model of you see a patient, you charge them and everything else. There's so many other value adds that you can have. In a cosmetic sort of business, you can sell cosmetics, you can do things that are not necessarily part of that business of cutting and snipping that are real value. And that as you do them, because you have pre-checked these products that say they are buying or using through your practice, you are getting a different and good revenue stream, but you're protecting your clients from other products in the market that might not be a good fit. So just thinking about how you can add more value to your clinic. If you're an ENT practice, can you sell hearing aids? Can you service them? Can you sell earplugs? Can you have a pharmacy within your practice that also then sells those medications? So if you work the mathematics and it pays to have a pharmaceutical person within the practice and dispense from there, it does a few things. One is that it's a one-stop shop, so it gives a customer experience is better, but you're also getting additional sources of revenue.
What next for Dr. Wahome as a person outside of City Health and Prodigy? Where do you see you in the next 10, 15, 50 years? Is there a book in the making? Is there whatever else do you think you'd be as a person? What do you think is in the offing for you?
Okay. I really hope I can do enough to be able to warrant the privilege of having to write a book that somebody can read. I really hope on a personal and professional level that I can be able to mentor as many of my colleagues, not just in ENT, but in the practice. Because there are two kinds of people. There are those who see a glass half full and one half empty. I think I'm a half full kind of guy. We're never going to be enough plastic or ENT surgeons or practitioners in this country in our lifetimes, and maybe even in our children's lifetime. So I feel that I hope I can be able to spread this message to our colleagues, say the cake is bigger than you think, and create your niche, and let's stop infighting, let's be together. So I'm hopeful that in terms of policy direction and otherwise, I can be able to help organize practitioners and doctors under that thinking, to be able to know that we are better partnering than competing. And I'm hopeful that that can help us also be able to translate that to services outside of the major cities that we are aware of. There is business in far-flung counties. There is business in some of those cities. There is a need as long as there are human beings there. So I'm just hopeful that I can be able to give more in terms of contribution in that kind of thinking.
Thank you.
Okay, nice. We've come to the end, unfortunately.
It was too short.
It was too short.
I know.
Too sweet.
I genuinely feel we could keep going for
There are
another
layers
hour.
and layers we can
And
still-
hopefully someday we'll have you back.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for sharing with us your 11-year experience doing business in medicine with Prodigy and City Health. These are just very well recognizable brands and businesses that we go around seeing, and just being able to interact with the brains behind the brand and understanding the thinking behind what went into those businesses is really fantastic, and we're privileged to have had you here, and as well for your honesty and your willingness to just share and not gatekeep information for us and the people who watch this show so avidly. There's a lot we can pass around and pass on to the next generations, and grow this healthcare thing to something that we never imagined it would look like. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
To our viewers, that has been, I believe, episode 6 of the Business of Medicine podcast. If you liked the content on this show, please like and subscribe on all our pages. We will share that with you down in the description down below. Come back for our next episodes. We have an array of amazing, fantastic guests, some that you might not even imagine would be here sitting with us coming up on the show. If you would like to be on the show yourself, or if you have a recommendation of somebody who you would like to be on the show, please get in touch with us as well, and we'd be happy to give them a look. Thank you so much, and see you on the next one.